As Leah mentioned, my name is Allison McDermott. I'm Deputy Director of Pro Bono Net, and today we're going to talk about how to leverage technology to do pro bono, and we have some, as Leah mentioned, some great panelists with us today. Our agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we'd use technology, and then Terry Ross, the Program Director at Illinois Legal Aid Online, is going to talk to us about a pro bono mentor-mentee matching system that they've created and launched recently. And then we're going to move into have Colton Lawrence, the website coordinator at Texas Legal Services Center, talk about, a kind of similar matching, although pro bono attorney and case partner program that they're working on in Texas. Then John Freeman, staff attorney and website coordinator at Minnesota Legal Services Center, is going to talk about, then we're going to have Abby Bieberman, Equal Justice AmeriCorps Works Fellow at Law Help New York, talk about how they're using pro bono law students to deliver remote services through their Live Help project in New York. And then finally, we'll have John Freeman, the staff attorney and website coordinator at Minnesota Legal Services Coalition, talk about how they're using document assembly technology to support a relatively new pro bono criminal expungement program in Minnesota. And then lastly, Tony Liu here at Pro Bono Net, who's a Pro Bono and Special Initiatives Coordinator here, is going to talk a little bit about looking ahead, about where technology and pro bono is going. And as Leah mentioned, we'll take questions kind of at the end of each of these sections, and panelists really encourage you folks to use the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and look forward to answering those for you. So a little bit about why we'd use technology, and I thought it'd just be helpful to kind of frame a lot of the things that we're going to hear about today in terms of benefits. Who is technology benefiting? Why would we go to the trouble of spending the money, of changing maybe the way that we're actually delivering services, of, why change the status quo? And technology benefits kind of, are three main audiences: ourselves, our pro bono programs, the actual pro bono attorneys, and then, of course, most importantly, our clients. When looking at some of the technology benefits that technology brings to us, the pro bono programs, it encourages greater pro bono participation by actually offering kind of meaningful work and support, and we're going to see that today as Terry and Colton talk about the matching programs that they're working on in Illinois and Texas. Technology also allows us really rapid communication with pro bono volunteers, and we'll see that in Live Help today. There are also examples around using listservs for providing mentoring support, and so that attorneys aren't out in kind of this ether working in vacuums. Technology actually can allow you to provide faster support and get their questions answered in a much more faster way, a more rapid way than we've been able to do in the past when kind of doing monthly or quarterly check-in calls with folks. In addition, technology allows our programs to connect volunteers who are doing this work and clients based on interests and needs. So, whether that's, emailing cases that are available to attorneys who within your database have said, I'm only interested in doing family law cases or housing cases. You have the ability to kind of do that email blast to folks based on that, how they've registered their preferences with you. And then even taking that a step farther, we'll look at today in terms of Illinois and Texas matching, really taking those interests of those volunteers and making really specific matches, making sure that they're feeling like that their time and interest and ability is being well matched. Technology can really help make that placement more efficient. It also can help build a community of volunteers for your program. We've talked a lot about that in kind of social media aspects, but really kind of thinking in particular around creating a volunteer community of your actual volunteers. And we'll look at that today when Tony talks a little bit about how Immigration Advocates Network is using some online forums to help kind of create that community for you. And then finally, technology can really help track activities and outcomes, and really tied closely to kind of online case management systems. Georgia, for example, has implemented in the last couple of years the legal server case management system, in particular with a focus around thinking about how their pro bono attorneys can interact and give case updates through that system online. So technology has the opportunity to kind of help you better track activities and better think about the outcomes. And another way that that's being done and thought about now in New York is Pro Bono Net has built a system called Pro Bono Manager, and we're really working with large law firms to use that system to help them manage their internal programs, which in turn then allow them to be able to produce streamlined and better reports for their legal aid partners that they're taking. So technology can provide that that extra help around kind of tracking program activities. Technology can also benefit your pro bono attorneys themselves in some of the ways that we've just kind of mentioned, 24/7 access to resources. So obviously websites already provide that, but in addition, we'll look at today in the live help context, you know, they don't actually even have to leave their desk sometimes to be able to provide pro bono support and help our clients. So really thinking about technology as providing access and opportunities for attorneys when they're ready to volunteer, not just, you know, kind of a 9-to-5 job. In addition, technology, you know, can allow us to easily communicate with substantive experts and other advocates who've taken similar cases, and we'll look at that today in some of the matching that I mentioned in Illinois, and again, the forums and the Immigration Advocates Network, some of the work that they've been doing. And finally, it can really benefit around, as we talked about, as I mentioned, the fact that attorneys can really say, these are the interests, this is the skill level I have, and these are the kinds of cases that I want, and be able to make those matches internally within kind of a database system. And of course, then finally, you know, what technology benefit? Why use technology in terms of benefiting our client populations? And they're kind of, you know, two main, I think, real reasons to think about this. And one is just that kind of greater resources and increased efficiencies can lead to higher quality, legal services to increase it, you know, to serve an increased number of clients. So, you know, in thinking about some of the projects that we look at today, you know, the idea and some of the goals behind them are to, you know, better support and better match attorneys so that in the end they're feeling like that their volunteer services are best used and most effective, and that in the end that will be better for their clients, provide higher quality legal services. And in addition, technology also can bridge physical and geographical barriers, and we'll look at that today in the context of live help, some video conferencing, and certainly in some of the online matching programs that Terry and Colton are going to mention as well. That technology really does allow clients not to have to travel long spaces, long distances in order to access, you know, scarce resources and scarce legal aid attorneys. So kind of in keeping in mind those benefits to each of those three audiences today, we're going to turn now to and ask our panelists to talk to you each about specific projects that they've each been working on around using technology to better benefit their programs within their state. And the first up is, as I mentioned, is Terry Ross, who's Program Director of Illinois Legal Aid Online, and she's going to talk about their pro bono match system. So Terry, are you ready?
Yeah, I need the controls transferred over to me.
Yep, great.
I can.
Okay.
Okay, great. So my name is Terry Ross. I'm from an organization called Illinois Legal Aid Online. I'm the program director. And Allison asked me to talk today about a new system that we have on our pro bono website. We have a website that is specifically designed for private attorneys who are doing pro bono cases in Illinois. That website is www.illinoisprobono.org. And the matching system was actually done in collaboration with another Illinois organization called the Public Interest Law Initiative. They're known as PILI as by their acronym. And you see our organization's mission here. PILI's mission is to cultivate a lifelong commitment to public interest law by creating opportunities for law students and lawyers to provide public interest and pro bono work in Illinois. And they are actually the organization who received the funding to create this matching system. They got it through our State Bar Foundation. And we worked with them in designing the system, and it launched in July. So let's talk a little bit about what the system is and what our goals were. The big goal, as Allison sort of talked about earlier for the system, is twofold. One side focusing on the client piece, trying to assist more people and assist them in a better way. And the second piece is trying to offer a meaningful volunteer opportunity for pro bono attorneys. And so those are the sort of big goals of the mentor case matching system. The stated goals of the system are twofold. And I understand that Colton is going to talk about a sort of case pairing system, so I'll focus a little more on the mentoring system. But our system does offer both things. The first is to connect volunteers within the state of Illinois to work together on a specific pro bono case, and secondly, to link professionals who are newer to pro bono work to more experienced volunteers who wish to serve as mentors. And you see our two images there of the connection that we are trying to make. So why use technology for pro bono? Again, this is sort of a repeat of what Allison already talked about. It's easy and fast, eliminates geographic barriers. There's anonymity in the matching system, so that nobody has to be offended if you request a match, if you're a mentee who's looking for a mentor, and you request a match, and the mentor, for whatever reason, doesn't want to take you on as a mentee, there's no hurt feelings. There's very little information that's shared until somebody accepts the match. And then finally, it's available at any time of day, as Allison said. And I'm going to go out and demo the site for you. Okay. So this is our pro bono webpage. This is the front page. And if you're not logged in, this is what it looks like. The mentor case match is up here on the tab. We click on this. Because we're not logged in, it's going to give us a brief description of what the system does, and then it's going to ask us to log in. Registration on the website is free, and it's basically anyone can register on this particular website. You just need to give us an email address and your name, first name, last name, and what organization you're affiliated with, law firm, whatever it is. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And if you have any questions about the system going forward after today's webinar, you're welcome to email me. There's my email address. Okay, so this is the actual system homepage for the system, and you see we have a control panel here. I have a few more system permissions. So I have I have this match system administrator. This wouldn't typically show up for somebody who's just registered on the website, but they would see all these other things. Find a mentor, become a mentor, find assistance with a case, become a case partner, and manage your volunteer profile. So what we do when people register on the website, we ask them to give us their preferences. So they can list out what areas of law they're interested in working in, what types of client populations they're interested in working with, if they have a particular geographic area that they want to work in, if they're what their time commitment would be. Is it just short periods of time? Is it in the evenings only? Is it on the weekends only? They can set all those things up, and then the system is designed to take all of that data and to match you with the appropriate person. So I'm just going to go. We have mentors, mentees, case partners. I'm going to go in here and do a find a mentor request. So it's a simple form, you can see, and here's the various things that we ask for. If they come here and they actually want case assistance, there's a link to the case assistance up here on the top. Here's all your list of practice areas, skills that you would like to improve or gain. And then the specific counties in Illinois. If you're looking for a mentor who's practiced in a certain county because you want some advice on whatever it may be, procedural information, judges, opposing counsel, you can select that, what your preferred method of communication is, and your availability. This is your setting expectations with your mentor. How often do you expect your mentor to assist you or meet with you? And then if you have worked with a legal aid organization in Illinois, here's a very comprehensive list of all of the different organizations, and you can list those here. You also have the option to upload a resume and any additional information. Then finally, we have our terms of use here. You have to select the box, and then you click Save. And then what the system does is, using a detailed matching algorithm, the system scans the profiles for the best fit when someone requests a mentor or case assistance. And then it will send an email to the mentor who is signed up through the system, who says that I'm looking for somebody to mentor, and it will say you have a match. Click here to go out to the website and see who it is and to accept or decline the match. So that's how the system works. One of the things that Allison asked about for us to talk about is if there's any impact or results to date to share. And I said before that the system launched in July. We're off to kind of a slow start with it. We've had some people sign up, not many. We've had a lot more, as you might expect, we've had a lot more people who are looking for mentors than we have had mentors. So that's been a definite challenge, and we're trying to market the system to that group of people who are experienced pro bono attorneys who might be willing to mentor someone who has not done pro bono. And so that's a challenge for us. The other thing in Illinois is that it appears, there's no definite answer, but it appears that people who act as a mentor aren't able to count that as pro bono on their attorney registration. And that's something that we're also looking into to see if we can get that added. So that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can go to the next panelist.
Terry, this is Allison. You mentioned the kind of the harder part, the content piece. than many of these technology projects around finding the mentors to actually do the work. Was this was there kind of an existing offline program that this was kind of helping make, streamline, or was this a kind of brand new concept within Illinois?
To my knowledge, there was nothing. If there was a mentor matching, it was done either through sort of law school programs where they were matching alums to current law students, or something specific, in law firms that they often have mentor-mentee relationships that are set up. But there was nothing that was sort of statewide, to my knowledge, that was going on. There's also there's a mentoring committee that the Illinois State Bar Association has, and we've been working with them pretty closely. But I don't think that they had anything, any kind of system that was streamlined to this extent.
Okay, and then Rochelle Hahn had a question as I guess kind of a follow-up to that was, were there existing or pro bono organizations who already had mentors that have shown any kind of resistance to kind of this kind of more of an automation?
None of the legal aid organizations that we've worked with, they've all been extremely supportive. And of course it's to their advantage. The system is really to their advantage. Legal aid attorneys are often, I think, frustrated with pro bono attorneys, especially newer pro bono attorneys who need more hand-holding because they've never taken this type of case before, they've never done this kind of work before, and they want to provide the best service they can. And so we haven't met any resistance in that regard.
Okay, great. And then Mark wanted to know, can anyone outside of Illinois get access to the site to explore?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just go ahead and sign up? Yeah,
just go ahead and register, and you should get a registration approval email within 24 hours of the business day.
Okay, great. And then finally, Mike Monahan says, hey, sell this to the bar associations.
Yes.
He said he thinks this would be a great app and wondered whether you guys had marketed to YLD.
We haven't done. I don't think we've done anything specific with the Young Lawyers divisions, which that's definitely something. Right now we're trying to get mentors, and then it'll be an easy sell, of course, to the law schools and the Young Lawyers divisions. So that's really our push right now. Yeah, and if anyone has any other suggestions, please let me know, because we would like, this is a great tool. We just need people to start using it. So.
Yeah. Great. And then Mike finally said, Tennessee in the past had gotten a TIG grant to do something along these lines, but not as extensive, nor I think kind of as, hadn't kind of, it was an first stage, a pilot stage around this, but he also just wanted folks to know that several states have mandatory mentoring, I guess, requirements, so including Georgia, which has had it for 4 years, he says, and
Great.
has experience in gathering mentors. So for other states where that's an issue, reaching out to you might be really helpful to learn what you guys have done.
Great.
Great. Well, that's it for questions. Thanks so much, Terry.
Thanks.
We're going to go ahead now and pass, I'll have you pass presentation over to Colson Lawrence, a website coordinator at Texas Legal Services Center, who's going to talk about some matching within the pro bono arena that Texas is working on.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Hi, I'm Colton Lawrence. I'm website coordinator at Texas Legal Services Center, and I'm just going to be talking about a new initiative that we are involved with here in Texas. It's brand new. It is expected to roll out in October for Pro Bono Week, so I'll just kind of tell you what's been going on with it. Basically, let me just give you a little background. TexasLawyersHelp.org is a collaboration of the Access to Justice community in Texas to increase the quantity and quality of legal services provided to low-income individuals. And back in August, we were approached by Texas Young Lawyers Association, which is also known as TYLA. Basically, they are launching a new initiative called Partnering for Pro Bono. Basically, what they're going to be doing is bringing together in-house counsel and law firm lawyers to help those in need. Basically, they're talking about it as like a matchmaking for attorneys, so they could partner to take on pro bono cases. So the challenge was, where would they get the pro bono cases? And so the natural inclination was to go with TexasLawyersHelp.org, which has the new cases feature where legal aid organizations can post their new cases. The problem we were facing was the fact that there weren't that many cases on the website. It was kind of like the chicken or egg issue. Lawyers weren't necessarily coming to Texas Lawyers Help to get cases, so the legal aid agencies were not posting their cases. So when we were approached by TILA to do this partnership, we were very excited. And basically the way it's working is in late October, TILA is going to be rolling out their Partnering for Pro Bono website, and I'll just give you a quick peek here. Like I said, basically it's like a matchmaking website instead of dating. It's for lawyers, and lawyers will go on and they will actually complete a profile, and when there's a match, then the attorneys will be connected by email, and then they will go to the Partnering for Pro Bono website to view open cases that are available to be taken for pro bono. And these cases are all the cases that are featured on Texas Lawyers Help. And basically the way we have this working is that there is a feed that goes from Texas Lawyers Help directly into TILA's Partnering for Pro Bono website. The point for that was so that lawyers would not have to register in 2 different locations, at Texas Lawyers Help and then also at Partnering for Pro Bono. So the way we have it set up now is the cases that are posted on Texas Lawyers Help will be fed directly into Partnering for Pro Bono. So as you can see, we have about 40 cases posted here. I'm kind of restricted on what I can show you on the website, but it's pretty much exactly what someone would post on Texas Lawyers Help will then just be fed directly into the Partnering for Pro Bono website, and it gives information about the case. And then at some point, I believe there's going to be a button here so that if you're an attorney, you can accept the case, and then emails will be shot to all the different parties, letting them know that someone's taking the case, and it will kind of provide like an ongoing update of what's happening with the case. Let's see. So like I mentioned, the reason it's basically the goal for Texas Lawyers Help is to increase traffic to the website and to kind of circumvent the challenges that we're having of getting attorneys to come to the website to take the cases, because as I mentioned before, the legal aid organizations were not posting as many cases because none of the cases were being taken. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. So like I mentioned, this will be launched October for Pro Bono Week. And, can I go ahead and open it up for questions? I'm sorry, my PowerPoint is not cooperating with me.
Sure, that's fine while you're looking at that. Bill Jones wondered, as I did as I was watching, how does the conflicts check piece work? Is that still handled kind of offline? And if there is a conflict, how does the case kind of get back in the queue?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, the person representing Partner for Pro Bono was not available to be on the call today. So that's an issue that they would actually be able to answer, but I can definitely get back to the person asking the question by email if I can get that.
Okay. Great. Probably it's probably an offline issue still in terms of conflicts checking.
Yeah, I believe so. Like I said, it's still kind of in beta testing, so it won't be launching officially for another week or so. So they're still working out some of the details. Okay,
great. I know Minnesota is working on a kind of similar case flow for within kind of the context of their statewide website this year, and that kind of conflicts checking piece is still kind of being done offline, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I imagine is still going to be happening with this.
Yep, great. Okay, great. Are there no other questions in the box? Any other questions for Colton? Great. Well, this is, one of the areas where, kind of this matching or streamlining of placing cases is, from my perspective, here at Pro Bono, one of the things that we hear the most about from the law firm, the private bar side, and is probably an area where there's the most resistance from the Pro Bono part, the Pro Bono program, side. So it's interesting to see these kinds of models moving forward and these collaborations between kind of the Pro Bono programs and the private bar about what were the ways to, do these kinds of, this kind of matching using technology, and what are the, the workflows that need to be in place and the partnerships that need to be in place to even kind of do these kinds of pilot programs. So it's exciting to see this moving forward, and I think as a community we look forward to hearing kind of more as you move out of the pilot stage and what works and what doesn't.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, if there are no other questions for Colton, and if there are, we're going to go ahead and move forward, but certainly if anything else comes up, just go ahead and type it in the question section, and we'll loop back. Next, we're going to move forward and talk with Abby Bieberman. As I mentioned, the Equal Justice AmeriCorps Works Fellow at Law Help New York, and she's going to talk about how the Law Help New York uses pro bono law students to deliver deliver services through their live help technology.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Abby, you might just want to speak up. Yeah, just speak up.
Okay. I'm going to move this closer to my mouth. Okay.
Thanks.
I'm going to try to go through some of the slides at the end here a little quickly because they're actually snapshots of law help. Of live help in action, but I have some volunteers who are prepared to demonstrate for you so we can actually do live help in the live, and you'll see how it works from the perspective of the caller, the user, and also the volunteer. But I'll start out with a little bit of history. First, live help is this actually says Montana Law Help, so ignore that, but it's similar to New York. Live Help provides virtual live assistance for website visitors who come to Law Help New York. I did not mean to go forward. I don't know why that went forward so quickly.
Yeah, if you just hit it back once, it
Okay.
won't go forward again. I think there's some timing that got stuck on it.
What it does is it helps visitors navigate the Law Help website by having live operators help somebody find the information, know your rights forms, and legal referral contact information for people all around New York State. Law Help is set up so that a person on the website can look up a legal referral based on the part of New York State that they're in. So our operators use that as well to make the appropriate referrals. Live Help is staffed by only volunteers except for myself. And we have used technology actually to reach out to law students and some pro bono attorneys, and we're working on expanding the pro bono attorney participation. Right now we're mostly staffed by law students, and we use this live person software, which I'll show you in a minute. This is some of the information we were able to receive. Part of the great thing about the live person software that we use is that it allows us to keep track of what information the visitors are looking for. So each person who comes on to Live Help first fills out, that just stepped forward again. Every person fills out a survey when they start a chat, in which they put in the information about where they're located, what general area of the law they're looking for, and then and that's about it. That's pretty much all and what what language they would prefer, and we have English and Spanish operators. So the information they put in their first survey, and then when they leave the chat, they're prompted to fill out an exit survey, and so we've used a lot of that data to better understand what our callers are looking for, and this is a chart of some of the different things: legal information, finding a lawyer, preparing for a court hearing, or applying for legal services or other. The law student volunteers are drawn from public interest pro bono programs. This year, we've actually had more interest from schools than we've been able to keep up with. So I have schools on deck for the spring with volunteers, or hopefully with volunteers, but with contacts already having been made with the pro bono coordinators. And we haven't had any problems with retention. Well, I guess we've had students. We haven't had any problems with students staying on for the whole semester, and most of the volunteers we had last year were third-year law students, but of the second-year law students we had, we were able to retain a few of them for this year. With volunteer attorneys, we do have a few volunteer attorneys who have worked with us who had either taken the bar and were awaiting results, or some who have already been admitted, and we also worked on a training program with LexisNexis, but we're trying to set up attorneys for the time period right now between semesters, because that's when we don't have law students. Although we're not opposed to having attorneys all year, that's one time when they're especially needed. So we're working on that with LexisNexis. The way it works is that I provide supervision to all the volunteers, and I do that through I do that a little bit through the LivePerson software, but actually we set up a system where we required all volunteers to be on Google Chat, so I can supervise them that way. It's a little bit easier than doing it through LivePerson, which is our live help software. So I require that everyone be sort of available for me to contact them during their volunteer shift, and and then they can also contact me during their shift if they have questions. And it's actually worked out really nicely because I can send them links to, if I see someone sort of struggling to find some information, I can send them links pretty quickly to something I know will be helpful for that caller. And then the project manager is me, and I'm funded by Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps Legal Fellowship. So far, as of when I gave this data in, we'd had 2,584 callers, and we launched in the end of January of last year. So it's been really amazing to see how many people we've gotten. And this is going to happen every time. Well, this is just sort of this extra information that I'm not going to talk too much about, but it's definitely what we've shown with New York is that it's manageable for volunteers even in larger states because we have a ton of callers and we're able to keep up with everybody. So what LiveHelp does for our Law Help website is gives us an idea of which agencies are over capacity. That's sort of just, we get that from our callers because they let us know where they've called and haven't been able to get services. We also know where we're sending people. So, and I keep track of all of this by monitoring the transcripts. Also better understand which resources are confusing on the Law Help websites. We have a ton of resources, which is great on Law Help, but what ends up happening is that users have a hard time sometimes finding the information that's tailored for an advocate versus someone who's not an advocate, and our volunteers are trained by me to be sure that they're sending information that's that a caller is going to be able to understand. And then we also know, when links are broken, when they're mislabeled, what's helpful and what's not helpful just from the reactions of our callers. So that's been really helpful for the staff at LawHelp. And we can also see where, what issue areas we don't have covered on LawHelp. So that's also been, it's a great way to sort of communicate with the public and get an idea of what's not on LawHelp. I'm going to go through this last part really quickly because I want to show you just how it works with the volunteer while I have someone. But this is what it looks like for a caller. This is the chat window here in the middle. And this is another view of that. But this is a survey that they'll fill out. And this is what it looks like from the from the operator's perspective. This is the live person. The chat goes on here, and then they can see a list of all the other chats going on. We keep them in New York only, so they can sort of tell if there's 2 volunteers, they can juggle back and forth. And here are canned chats. These are chats that were developed by myself and my predecessor to make it easier for volunteers to get some of the information that we give out a lot, called the disclaimer, which is something we give out to everybody. And I'm going to go in now and just show you an example of how it works, because I think this will give you a better idea. And I have actually my live person software open, so you can see both angles. This is what a user would click on. They can choose English or Spanish. If they choose Spanish, then the rest of the survey comes up in Spanish. We will just select Kings County, but we have every county in New York. And we'll just do family law. So this is from the perspective of the caller. And we'll wait and see how long it takes someone to pick up, but hopefully it'll only be a second. I wanted to say in the meantime that what's great about this for volunteers has been that it's easy for anyone to install anywhere. So for both lawyers and for law students, it's okay. So I'm going to go back to what I was just saying and just tell Frances that that she's live right now, so that she doesn't pay too much attention to this. So anyway, this is all I wanted to show you, was how it works. But from the perspective of the volunteer, this is what they see. They have the chat window going on here. They have this is the survey on the right, bottom right, where I've filled out the information that I know about what I'm looking for. A lot of people don't necessarily know what area of the law they're looking for, but that's, so sometimes it'll say I don't know. And then this is the list of all the chats that have been going on. So I wanted to just show you that quickly. Let me just close this out. After they close out, they're prompted to either have their chat sent to them, which I'm not going to do, but then they're asked to fill out this information about what they were looking for. And this is what helps us later on, because I review all of that. So that's what I wanted to show you. That was the little demonstration I wanted to do. But in terms of how this has worked with volunteers, again, it's the kind of thing where an attorney can volunteer 3 hours a week from their desk, from their home office. A law student can volunteer from the library or from home. And as long as they keep their, as you can see on my screen, actually, this little flashing symbol on the bottom shows that a call is going on or coming in. And as long as someone has sound on their computer, they can sort of go about other work while they're waiting to get calls. And so it's very convenient in that sense. And sometimes a person is juggling 3 chats at a time, and sometimes they have a little bit of downtime. So I think people appreciate being able to volunteer from a place where they can do, kind of a couple things at once while they're waiting if there is some downtime in the chats. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I mean, in terms of some of the issues that were brought up at the very beginning, that like sort of the broader issues that we're talking about in this webinar, in terms of bridging physical and geographical boundaries, I've been sort of astounded by how many calls we get from the counties in northern and western New York. And I think that that's been a really great thing about Live Help, is being able to kind of help people in the communities where there aren't as many legal services offices. And if there are, they maybe cover a number of different counties, so it's difficult to get representation, or they don't necessarily, represent people in that client for whatever reason. So it kind of has shown me some of the areas where people are struggling to find legal services, and I think that we're able to help people, better represent themselves in those areas. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, and I guess I'll open it up for questions.
Great. Yeah, we have a few questions, Abby. I'll start with Noah from a pro bono perspective. He was curious how much training law students receive prior to helping clients. Are they familiar already with Law Help New York, or how do they familiarize themselves?
Yeah, most people have not been that familiar with Law Help. So the training is, so I've done it a few different ways. And actually, one way is that I'll send out a position posting, like a job posting, to the pro bono coordinator at a law school, and I'll have them sort of send that on their system to law students who then apply. Another way is that I'll go to law school and do an information session, so people are familiar with Law Help. The second sort of contact I make with the school is usually once I've determined that there's interest, I return to the school, or in some cases, if it's a school far away, I'm only going to go when I know there's interest. But and then I lead a training for about an hour, on Law Help and on Live Help. That gives people an opportunity to see Law Help, to get familiar with it, and then also I sort of train them on the difference between legal information and legal advice, because that's very important that all of our volunteers understand that they're not giving legal advice. And I show them Law Help, and we do actually 2 scavenger hunts to find information. So that's their first training, and they also receive an operator manual at that point on the Live Person software. In terms of getting more familiar with Law Help, I then at that time I schedule a practice chat with all of the volunteers individually. And I have them download the Live Person software, and I call them at the time that we're scheduled. The practice chat usually lasts for 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how comfortable I think the person is. Sometimes I make people do 1 practice chat if it seems like they get it, and some people I tell them to do 2. And the point of the practice chat is 2 things. 1, to familiarize them with the live person, actually to familiarize them with Law Help, because I've told them to look at Law Help before the practice chat, but I think people feel a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of resources on there, so they're not really sure where to begin. And when we do the practice chat, I've given them a real question, so they sort of have to navigate their way through Law Help. And then they're also simultaneously learning how to use the Live Person software. But then, I have a general idea of what the common questions we get are. So I know that we get a lot of questions in family law and housing and unemployment benefits, for example. Those are some big areas that we see. So I always tell people to, go through those areas before their first practice. But I sort of monitor people really closely in their first couple weeks. I can tell if they're getting Law Help, if they're sort of understanding how it works, and I can give people extra tips. So that's also the thing about the Live Person software, is that I can watch everybody's chats while they're going on. But it really, people become familiar with Law Help just by having to find something in there. So that's how it ends up working.
Great. And then Ken, we just have a couple more minutes before we need to move on to John, but just Kenneth had a couple of questions that I thought would, around the kind of pro bono program, would speak to that. And he was wondering what the hours of operation were for Live Help. So when's it available vis-a-vis your pro bono program?
Well, that sort of depends on the volunteers. When I have one volunteer right now, and I'm actually in the process of training a few more, so there may be more, who volunteers from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So we have every day it's available from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then right now one evening a week we have 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then in the I sort of supervise them again from my own computer, so it works out easy enough for me.
Okay, great. And then Kenneth also was kind of wondering, do you do any financial screening? That looked like you had some of the chats surveys.
We do. We don't ask that question actually on the survey that was in the slide. We don't ask income. I sort of tell my volunteers to ask questions that they that can help them understand what somebody's income level is, so that they're not referring them to an organization that definitely won't be able to help them. Asking questions like, are you employed, is one way of sort of understanding if someone might be eligible for services. But we don't keep track of sort of all of our, we don't keep track of users' income levels. Sometimes I'll ask personally, and I tell my volunteers this, to sometimes say, are you comfortable telling me how much you make? If not, I'll send you a link to this legal services offices, but this legal service office, but be sure to click on the income requirements before you call them. Otherwise, or if you want, you can tell me how much you make, and I'll let you know if I think you're going to be eligible. So I kind of talk the user through that sometimes.
Okay, great. And I think that's it. Thank you guys for your questions, and thank you, Abby, for your presentation and talking to us about how you're using law students to deliver services.
Okay.
Great.
So
and then I think Leah will move over to John Freeman to talk. Yep, you're great.
Okay.
We grabbed it from you for John. So John Freeman is a staff attorney and website coordinator with Minnesota Legal Services Coalition, and he's going to talk about how they're using document assembly to support a relatively new pro bono project in Minnesota.
Hi, this is John Freeman in Minnesota. Oh, it's already skipped. The project that I'm going to talk about is something that we developed primarily for pro bono attorneys, although I work for the State Support Office for Legal Services in Minnesota. And the idea was that we had a need for our clients, that many of our clients were impacted by criminal records, and that our providers were often without the resources to seal their records. And we wanted to basically develop a tool through which we could engage pro bono attorneys to assist with this process by seeking expungement of criminal records. And we knew that many pro bono attorneys would come at it from not having practice in this area of law before, so we wanted to provide them with as much support as we could. Basically, I'm going to I'm sorry, my slides are skipping around a little bit. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about why we came to develop this project, and then I'll go more into the specifics of the project, and then I'll show an example of the output. So in Minnesota, like in many states, if not all states, basically any brush with the law creates a criminal record. It doesn't really matter what the outcome was, and many of our clients, because they have criminal records, are shut out from getting jobs or from getting adequate housing, and these are sanctions that are primarily impacting legal services clients. Expungement is potentially a very good remedy in Minnesota. It can lead to sealing records through the courts and through the police department, and sometimes they can go further and they can seal records for administrative agencies as well. Many jobs in Minnesota require, many of the jobs available to low-income people specifically require licensing from either the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health, and they typically check criminal record status, and whether it's an arrest, a conviction, or any other type of status, our clients are often foreclosed from getting jobs. In many cases, the possibility of getting an expungement is very real and very likely, but it's a fairly complex process and it's a fairly lengthy process. We have, because of that, in the past had difficulty recruiting pro bono attorneys to take on expungement cases. The idea was that it wasn't something that they felt able to jump right into, and that they felt they would have to sort of have that as a quasi-specialty in order to adequately serve clients with expungements. And during this period of time, really the law has just gotten more complex, and there really just are a handful of experts in the area in Minnesota. And so that's kind of where we started. Just to give you a sense of the complexity, this is a list. It's not even technically a complete list, but it's a fairly complete list of the legal avenues for expungement, and one avenue is only appropriate in a very specific set of circumstances. And it's difficult for an attorney, particularly one who doesn't normally practice in this area, to necessarily determine in all instances which is the most appropriate. For instance, there's a big category of expungement that involves cases that were resolved in the defendant's favor versus not resolved in their favor, and that's actually legally a different question than whether there's a conviction or not. So it gets into a lot of nuance. There are resources in Minnesota that have been developed over the years to try to impart this knowledge from the people who know about this area of law to pro bono attorneys, but there's really a lot of it. And when we embarked on this project, we started with hundreds of pages of resources that we wanted to synthesize. To further complicate things, first of all, many of the clients are trying to expunge multiple records. They may be from multiple counties, and it means that there's a great deal of paperwork, a great deal of complexity in having to file each case separately in separate counties. And so we wanted to deal with those realities when we started this process. So for those of you who aren't familiar with document assembly is basically TurboTax for court forms, and we wanted to create a comprehensive document assembly interview format for criminal expungement. And we wanted to start at the beginning of the process and work through the end of the process. And we also wanted to go a little bit further and to take all of the legal knowledge that we'd acquired, that people had developed or that was in statutes and cases, and try to package it all together into one electronic kind of place on the internet that would feature mostly these document assembly interviews, but would embed all the other information so that somebody could just go there and kind of get through the process through links and reading and so forth. So we partnered with Volunteer Lawyers Network, which is Minnesota's largest pro bono placement organization, and they had already developed a clinic for doing criminal expungements with pro bono attorneys. So they had developed some expertise and some documentation in this area. And the Council on Crime and Justice, which does advocacy for formerly incarcerated individuals and other defendants, and also had developed a lot of legal knowledge in this area. So we ended up gathering everything that we could, which included forms, practice aids, case law, fact sheets, etc. And we tried to separate this process into individual steps and then to address that with one page. As I said earlier, we wanted to have both the forms and the educational materials that inform the completion of the forms. And so we started with just a page on our website, projusticemmen.org, that goes through what the 3 steps are for the expungement process. And for each of the steps, there's more information, including practice tips, whether the step is required in the individual circumstance. But the text on that page really isn't that much. It's all of those other resources we're just linking out to. So this just shows an example. An important question when you're starting out is making sure you have the client's complete criminal history. What does that mean? So someone clicks on a link. If they already know what that means, of course, they can skip over that part. But if they're fairly new to this process, we try to provide them with as much detail as we can without inundating them upon first view. So then we developed the interviews using document assembly, and we used HotDocs as our document assembly program, and then hosted them on the ProJustice website. But when we did that, we realized that because of the complexity of the area law, we had to take a number of other steps to make this simpler and more straightforward. So the first thing we did is we developed it in such a way that no matter how many offenses the individual has and how many counties they took place in, they would only go through the interview once, and there's just a very small area of the interview that requires them to go back through to identify which crime that they're seeking to expunge. And one thing that's helpful about this is, I think this is true in most states, that the individual seeking expungement needs to delineate their entire criminal record on any petition. So even if they're just petitioning in one county, they have to delineate the entire record. So all we did is we separate that out into sets of pleadings so that they can go forth in different counties and different judicial districts, as shown here. The second thing we do is that complex question about what's the avenue for expungement. We kind of do that for them in the background. We ask them a series of questions to see if they would be sort of filtered into one area or another, such as controlled substances offense. There's a particular statutory expungement avenue for that, or for juveniles, etc. And then ask them what the disposition was, and that kind of explains what the legal avenue for expungement should be. But there's also further reading on this. So you see there it says, why was the final disposition of this offense? Why is that important? When they click on that, there'll be a lot more information, including links to all of the cases that have made these determinations. And then at the bottom of each of these, because we're imagining in many cases people have more than one eviction for expungement. We've had as many as, I think, 18. That's pretty unusual, but we basically identify which set of pleadings they're getting and making sure that there's a way to make sure that they're kept in order. So you see there's a case number at the bottom of each page, the offense in question so that they know that this is for a particular set of pleadings, a title of the pleading itself, and then a page number for that. And then this was the most recent thing we added. We thought that in the end, a set of pleadings is going to print out based on what was said earlier, and we thought that we need to explain to the attorney what this packet is going to mean for them. So if they print out if they print out expungement pleading for 4 cases, each of them will be preceded by the summary page, and the summary page explains what the basis for expungement that they'd be proceeding under, what the burden is, etc. So the benefits that we've seen from this is that we've gotten a lot of pro bono interest. In fact, when we announced this, we had a webinar to kind of demonstrate and to go over basics of criminal expungement law, and we had about 140 attendees. And we wanted to, we thought that this would be helpful for judges as well because they receive consistent sets of pleadings, give more time for those who have developed the expertise to do one-on-one assistance, and they've been able to memorialize their expertise, and better results for clients. I'm going to go and quickly show what this looks like. So here's the first, this is a set of pleadings for 2 different cases. So there are 41 pages of documents, but they're separated into 2 sets of pleadings, and they're both based on different legal theories, essentially. And so this is just an overview page for the attorney. Then we get into a cover letter for the judge, the notice and petition, a proposed order, which is going to be based on the specific type of case, affidavits of support, and then a fee waiver. So once you get to the end of it, then it starts over and there's a new set of pleadings that explains why this case is proceeding in this way. So I think that's, those are all my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, we don't have, just a reminder to folks, if you have a question, you can use the questions section and just type in a question on, and you can find it on the control panel on GoToWebinar. John, could you talk a little bit of just, I know it's a new project, but just kind of any impact? You said you've had a really increased interest from pro bono attorneys around this? Have you gotten good feedback from the courts at all, or?
I have not collected any feedback from courts yet. We instituted this in early spring, but we have been making some improvements along the way, and so we'll kind of do a relaunch very soon. But I know that since then we've been getting about 70 people a month, 70 attorneys a month filling these pleadings out and presumably filing them. They've also been used in a number of clinics, and we've had about 60 new members to ProJustice that joined the site specifically to get this information. So we think it's starting to take hold. We haven't done a lot of outreach yet, but the webinar that we did, as I said, was exciting to get that much interest in it.
Yeah. That's great. Mike Monahan wondered, have you connected with the State Department of Labor around this?
We haven't. No, we haven't. It's a really good idea, actually. We're kind of just starting to develop an outreach plan, and my only hesitation in answering the question is that we haven't done a pro se version of this. We're talking about doing it. So far our outreach has been specifically to attorneys, but it's a very interesting idea, particularly if we do a pro se version, which we're talking about doing.
Okay, great. And then I just wondered, a last question, what have there been other areas, just kind of based on the fact that you are receiving a really good response already from pro bono attorneys on this, I know, relatively new initiative. Are there other areas that you guys are thinking about in terms of developing or using this similar technology around pro bono attorneys?
Yeah, we're talking about the next area that we're looking at would be in debt collection cases. They can get fairly complex. I'll say that most of our document assembly efforts have been geared towards pro se, but there are specific areas that we're finding that there's just a level of complexity that it makes sense at least to start off by gearing them towards attorneys. We've done a few other forms, but I think in terms of trying to be comprehensive and see a case through, debt collection is probably what we'd look at next.
Okay, great. And actually, there are just two last somewhat related questions. Christy wondered, what the approximate startup time to get up and running was and the cost, and then related to the cost factor, Mike Monahan wondered whether the templates were available through the Hot Docs National Library, so to speak.
Okay. It took us a while. It took us probably about a year before we had the initial launch, but we were kind of thinking it through during that whole process. I mean, I think somebody trying to replicate this wouldn't necessarily take that long. We really had to. It happened to be during a period that the law was changing sort of rapidly too, so we had to be making changes along the way. But all of this data is absolutely available through the Law Help Interactive server, and we'd be happy to share all of it anytime. As far as costs, I mean, we were lucky to just have very willing partners. Almost every element of expense has, since we already have the software, has just been staff time that we just kind of developed the right coalition of partners to volunteer the staff time. And we did get a training grant, a small training grant through Pro Bono Net, through their demonstration projects grant process that helped us do the webinar that we did and some of the other outreach that we've done so far.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you taking the time and talking to us about this, I think, really exciting way of using document assembly to support pro bono attorneys and pro bono projects. It's great to see it both kind of used in clinic models as well as kind of representation with the attorneys. So it's great. Thank you.
Sure. No problem.
And finally today, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and look ahead with Tony Liu, the Pro Bono and Special Initiatives Coordinator here at Pro Bono Net, and have Tony talk a little bit about, some of the uses of technology that are either really, really pilot in our community or are ideas that haven't been piloted yet. So, Tony.
Great. Well, some of the ideas that we'll be talking about today are actually not necessarily what's next in technology. As we've already talked about, the case matching system that is being set up in Texas by the Texas Young Lawyers Association is soon to launch, and you know, people have been using technologies like video conferencing and using online unbundled services. But I think the point today is to sort of highlight that maybe some of these things have not been explored in a little while, or are not being developed for use to support pro bono, and that maybe advances in technology make them more feasible today. And we'll talk a little bit also about how one of our sister projects, the Immigration Advocates Network, is using a throwback technology of online forums to actually engage volunteer lawyers. So we've already looked at the Texas Young Lawyers Association automated case matching, but I think it bears talking about a bit, because in a lot of these trainings and webinars, many people have raised the question about when automated case matching will become a reality. I think a lot of pro bono projects find it frustrating that they send lists of cases to firms or to pro bono clearinghouses, and attorneys complain that they don't have time to be sifting through an email with 10 cases listed, and the cases are not targeted towards their interests, and finding that one case that they might want to handle is not necessarily something that's quick and simple as it should be. And so I think the potential for this, for using technology, is to create targeted listings, similar to the way web search engines and companies like Google and Facebook might use information they know about you to target ads towards your interests. Creating a profile in some kind of system that identifies what your interests are might help weed out the cases that you probably would never take. And it avoids the email fatigue issue of our email inboxes these days are flooded with so many requests for assistance or our newsletters, and creating a system where you can log in and see just the things that you want to see, just the cases that are of interest to you, is probably would be a real step forward in making sure that it's as easy as possible for pro bono attorneys to take cases. Some of the challenges to trying to develop this kind of technology, the human element of case matching is really integral. I think that most people have found, not only in the screening part of the case, where you might need a legal services attorney as the frontline attorney doing the intake just to do issue spotting, but even once the pro bono attorney expresses interest in a case, you may not necessarily be able to just say, okay, here's the client's contact info, call the client. And automated systems would need to find a way to build in that continued involvement of the legal services organization to shepherd that relationship, to foster it a bit, to make sure that it's working out. And then the other issue, which Colton alluded to a little bit, is that you need to have a reliable database with a critical mass of cases in it in order for attorneys to feel confident that this is the place to go to find pro bono cases. And that database needs to be curated with some regularity, and a lot of encouragement has to be brought to bear to make sure that cases are being fed into that database. With video conferencing, it's already, that technology's been around for a while, and it's already in use in some areas. Mike Monahan, who's one of the attendees, has been using it to great success to help coordinate a lot of the pro bono work that he does in Georgia. And I think in California, they're experimenting with using it to deploy pro bono services to rural areas by attorneys in the cities. And I think, and also in Montana, courts are already starting to use video conferencing to actually hold hearings. and allow pro bono attorneys to appear virtually through video in a court hearing where they may not otherwise take a case because of the travel time involved. I think the point in bringing it up today is to point out that tech costs have really come down, and that it's not a technology that only the big law firms can use now to have their virtual conference calls between offices in different cities, but services like Skype are low cost and it can even be free, and Google also provides video chatting for free, and wireless internet through MiFi devices or wireless cards can make it very feasible to have a laptop at offsite at a clinic, for example. And these types of technologies can also be used to make it easier for example, if you have a legal services attorney that is mentoring pro bono attorneys and the pro bono attorneys are at a clinic, you could make it easier for that legal services attorney to perhaps provide mentorship via the video chat, video conferencing, as opposed to requiring legal services attorneys, who are pressed for time to be able to physically go to every single clinic or intake site. One thing that has been developed in the past and is not perhaps gains widespread acceptance or use yet is internet representation, and related to that, using internet representation to provide unbundled services. And this is a project of the Legal Services of Northern Michigan that was launched several years ago, and I believe is also being looked at as a model in Minnesota. And I think the idea here is that someone seeking legal information can input their information after going through a screening, and then that information gets after a series of questions gets passed on to a volunteer attorney who will provide an answer again through this online system. And I think that part of the reluctance of programs to really explore this is tied up in the ethical questions involved in either conflicts checking or attorney-client privilege and confidentiality, and the sort of the general questions of an attorney might have about providing legal information to somebody they don't even meet or cannot even verify the identity of. And I think various state bar associations as well as the ABA are really starting to explore this question of ethics, the use of technology in delivering services. And recently, Will Hornsby, the staff counsel of the ABA, participated in a discussion, a webinar discussion, talking about ethics and the use of online document assembly. And I think it's something to pay attention to as innovators in this area of using technology to deliver legal services, push the envelope that many of our ethics rules were not really meant to, or were not created in a context where the drafters were contemplating the possibility that an attorney sitting at a computer on one end might be delivering services to a client and sitting at a computer at another and without ever meeting. And then finally, I wanted to point out that our sister site, the Immigration Advocates Network, has done a soft launch of a forum tool that aims to provide mentorship and discussion for advocates doing immigration work. And the pro bono angle of this is that you'll see that there's a column there for moderators. The moderators for this particular forum are all members of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and it allows private attorneys to do pro bono work in terms of supporting immigration advocates in the nonprofit world by providing mentorship and expertise, answering specific questions about legal procedures or changes in immigration law, and that's typically been, I think, a role that the private bar and the public interest legal services organizations have not found a simple way to bridge, and this is an interesting way to get private attorneys to contribute back to serving the underserved in a way that allows them also to do it from the comfort of their own offices and answer questions at their own pace and on their own timing. And it also pulls this out of the email inbox in a way so that people who are just looking for answers can come here. And because it's a forum instead of an email listserv, it's easily searchable and displayed in a way that somebody who has a question about something, rather than posting the question all over again on a listserv, can just come here and search for an answer that may have previously been posted. So some of the ways that I think, creative ways that we can think about how to get pro bono attorneys to do more work or to support the increase of pro bono time with the use of technology without having to actually without actually taking on complex complex pro bono cases in the traditional sense of pro bono. So with that, I'll open it up to comments or questions on sort of the future of pro bono technology.
Okay, and just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, you can use the question section over on the control panel to ask Tony or any of our presenters today any follow-up questions along that lines. And along those lines, Christy wanted to follow up around in terms of if programs don't have technology people, how do they do any of this? How do they make any of this possible? And Christy, you referred to it as it is such a great resource, but since I'm not sure specifically which one you met, if we kind of think about all of the ones here today, Tony, if you have some ideas around in terms of contacting us or LSNTAP around how to implement some of these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always a challenge. I mean, staffing and providing resources towards these technology solutions, I think, is something that doesn't have as much mind share as we at Pro Bono Net and the folks at LSNTAP would probably like. One thing that I've found is that a lot of programs are able to find volunteers that might be interested in this particular aspect. We're working with a program in upstate New York who, until very recently, wasn't paying much attention to the tech side of their pro bono presence, and found a volunteer who was able to really help them develop that, and that's something to think about. Either retired folks or perhaps law students that have an inclination to explore these things. But it is true. I think there has to be some sort of mindfulness within an organization, some sort of express purpose towards learning this stuff and implementing this stuff, because it does change, and you need to have somebody who's monitoring it and able to translate it into your work. Many of these examples today are great, but without the energies of the panelists that we're presenting, you can't just necessarily port them into your work directly.
Okay, great. Thanks. And Carly wants to know if you've had any experiences using Skype as a means for pro bono attorneys to meet with clients in remote areas. Any cons, or the face-to-face dynamics of working with clients lost, or does the webcam meeting seem to suffice? And I don't know that but I'll maybe open that one up to our panelists, although I know nobody kind of addressed it directly today, but does anybody have any experiences with that? I know in Minnesota, just from my Twitter feed today, that a Duluth pro bono program is using Skype in much the way that Tony talked about in video conferencing. So I don't know, John, if just put you on the spot if you know about that or any thoughts around Skype.
I don't. I actually have not used Skype. I can attest to, just in my short time in being in this position, though, that a lot of these technologies have either come down radically in price or been free. and we've relied on that. And I also think that increasingly there are more and more tools that don't really take a technology background. I certainly don't have one to pick up and to use. And just to pick up on one question previously, I also would just suggest that folks consider something that we've done in doing a lot of the work on some of the projects we've been working on, which is using the AmeriCorps Vista program, which is specifically about capacity building, which is essentially what we're talking about, and it's very little money for the program, and we've hired people who didn't have particularly technology backgrounds that have been able to learn things like hot docs in a short amount of time and do a lot of the development work for us.
I will say just very quickly on the video conferencing, I have actually previously working as a legal services attorney was able to use video conferencing to meet with my pro bono counsel, who was actually based in Washington, D.C., and I was representing someone here in New York, and so it was, that experience felt fairly seamless in terms of the client still, I think the client still developed a connection to the attorney because she could see her by video, and it was live, live conversation, and it really felt like that person was sitting there in the room. I think the technology has advanced to a point where it doesn't feel like it's sort of an alien experience that it might have been several years ago when bandwidth and technology was not as advanced.
That's a great point. And Carly, I'm happy it's Patty Murto in Duluth, Minnesota, and was the person today who was saying that she's using Skype to connect pro bono attorneys to their clients. And I'm happy to get her contact information and have that sent that to you as a follow-up. And John's point around AmeriCorps volunteers is a great one. We've seen, we both actually LSNTAP and Pro Bono Net nationally have used AmeriCorps volunteers to help staff technology projects, but a lot of state and local programs have done that as well. Louisiana, Minnesota, Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, just to name a few. So that it's a really great resource in terms of trying to think about, to provide some staffing in an area to an experiment, which, frankly is not something that makes it into the budget often. So that's a great point. We are over our time by 3 minutes. Thank you, Leah, for not cutting us off.
No problem.
Wanted to thank LSNTAP for co-hosting and moderating with us today, and I thank all of our presenters for presenting so well today, and for you folks for listening and attending and asking great questions. And if we haven't answered anything, please follow up with us. And Leah, I don't know if there are any last things NTAP wants to say.
Just that I'll be sure to upload this afternoon to lsntap.org along with the PDF version of these slides, so everyone will be able to view these. And then I will send out a link through email to all of the registered attendees. And thank you everyone so much for coming, and thanks to our panelists. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Great, thanks. Bye.
Bye.